My first question is the Minister aware of the difficulty that representatives of the people face in even getting conversations or meetings with these bauxite companies? And further, is he aware that it's not much easier to get consultation with JBI as well?
Listen carefully to what he's really saying here. He's not just complaining about missed meetings. He's exposing a power shift. When an elected member of parliament can't even get a conversation with these companies, that means the people themselves have been locked out. Communities are being shut out of decisions that shape their land, their health, and their future. And think about how dangerous that is. MPs are chosen by the people to speak on their behalf, yet they're being treated like outsiders in their own constituencies. That tells you who really holds the power. Not the voters, not the parliament, the corporations.
The CEO had called me personally on Monday. He said there was a fatal accident involving a convoy of overseas linemen that had four fatalities, and that it was essentially they were traumatized, and he felt it was important for him to be there to deal with the matters on the ground.
Is he a doctor, a nurse? Does he drive a hearse? Look, this is the third time.
Notice the similarity here. Warmington is asking JPS for the same thing Crawford was asking the bauxite companies for: access, response, and accountability. One is energy, the other is mining, but the request is identical. The people just want the companies to show up and answer.
I also wonder if the Minister is aware that lands that might not have been mined out for bauxite have been under the ownership of these bauxite companies, and many have been deemed unworthy of mining, yet still under the ownership of these companies. Is the Minister therefore further aware that this monopolization of ownership has robbed the people of agricultural and other income-earning activities, housing, opportunities, and indeed, even burial sites in these communities that have to go far and wide to bury their relatives?
Land monopoly is quiet power. It doesn't look violent, but it is destructive. When companies hold thousands of acres and don't use them, they aren't just owning land. They are freezing opportunity. That land could be feeding families. It could be housing young people. It could be building communities. Instead, it sits locked behind corporate plans that may not materialize for 10 or 20 years. So farmers are landless while land lies idle. Young families can't build while acres remain unused. Communities suffocate while space exists. This isn't development, it's denial.
Is the Minister also aware that recreational activities have been extremely affected by the pollution of rivers, in particular as it relates to caustic being released into these rivers, causing for the habit of recreation at these waterways to end, stymie, and indeed many of these rivers to be avoided by children, their parents, and the citizens who once enjoyed the recreational benefits of these entities?
Rivers are no longer safe spaces for children, families, or culture. Recreation is not luxury. It is mental health, community bonding, and heritage. Pollution removes a basic human relationship with nature. Avoidance of rivers shows environmental fear has replaced environmental trust.
Is the Minister aware that there has been anecdotal evidence that there has been greater roof damage in bauxite areas relative to the wind than in most other areas that had even greater wind forces from the hurricane? That multiple roof loss have been attributed to weakened roofs due to the bauxite dust. acid rain and the rusting that has been caused in these bauxite areas due to the dust. Is the minister also aware that this dust and acid rain have also affected agricultural output? And I would love to piggyback on the member from St. Anne who indicated that there's ownership of extreme numbers of acres, but is it possible to know the output from these entities? Because while it is, we may say, 7 acres under production, is it possible for us to know the output from these areas? Because it sounds as if many are just holding lands and not necessarily producing on these properties that they claim that they own. Finally, is the minister aware that there have been a cease on bauxite, what you call it, they used to call it dust money, in many communities, that the bauxite company has unilaterally decided not to pay the dust contribution? I heard the unfortunate number of $67 a day in South Manchester per family, and yet still was jealous of the fact when it compares to $0 a day in Northwest St. Catherine. A unilateral decision taken by the bauxite company. Finally, is the minister aware that the employment practices of these bauxite companies would have been deemed by any reasonable employee of the Ministry of Labour to be unfair practices, and also a focus on contracts and subcontracted labor into many of these plants, reducing what was once the benefits through labor and earning from the bauxite companies? Can the minister therefore provide information if there has been any engagement from any arm of government to have more fair practices within these areas? If I may be allowed, Minister, I'll also ask, is the minister aware that there's been many damage to houses due to blasting from bauxite mining and also from the facilitation of bauxite mining? So many of these roads to the mines in their preparation have also caused for great damage, for which that's what I'm wondering if he's aware. And further aware that the damage to these areas have been refused compensation, with the bauxite entities unwilling even to visit when informed by many of these communities, like Wandibolas, about damage to their houses due to blasting and other activities such as those. We don't want to know if the minister is such aware.